great meeting. So I would like to talk a little bit more on nanoparticle side and talk about how nanotechnology can actually enhance and do good to high intensity focused ultrasound. But in the talk you will see, I'll also touch on some of the aspects which are related to ultrasound in general. There's something missing on my slides, unfortunately. There were two questions, so maybe I'll just go through these questions. So there were two questions on this slide. The first question was, why do we have to use nano? Why do we have to use nanoparticles and nanotechnology jointly with high-intensity focused ultrasound? And the second question was, which nanoparticles should we use? Because we have a plethora of nanoparticles which we can choose, and each of them will have a completely different characteristics and properties, which may do good or bad to HIFU. And if we try to look on the first question, why do we use nanoparticles or nano enhancing for HIFU? If your answer is, because I can, don't do it. You have to have a real purpose of using the nanoparticles for HIFU and the application with HIFU. And in our laboratory, we believe that the application is what Professor Wu mentioned at the beginning, is actually multimodal therapy. Multimodal therapy for cancer becomes a gold standard, which means that we combine different therapies. We combine chemotherapy with ablation, with hypothermia. We combine maybe gene therapy, immunotherapy with ablation. So we are exploiting the synergies between the different modes of treatment to actually enhance these. But also maybe these nanoparticles will not only allow us to deliver the drug or immunotherapy or maybe gene to improve the success of the treatment, but maybe itself, the nanoparticles can enhance the activity of our HIFU and maybe make it even more personalized, and you will see it in a second. And now, if you just take any random nanoparticles and you put them into your bloodstream, and I think every one of us is really expert of nanoparticles these days because we were vaccinated for COVID with nanoparticle-based vaccines. What happens? These nanoparticles are flowing in the bloodstream, but only about 1 to 2% is on the target, which means that 99% is flushing somewhere else in the body. So this is not perfect, because imagine if this was your chemotherapy, the 99% will be off target. And also, these nanoparticles will go only 400 microns deep into your tumor. So what do? We actually want to increase the amount of nanoparticles in the volume of tumor. And in this situation, we apply planar ultrasound, planar wave ultrasound, just a normal ultrasound, not a focused ultrasound. So this is like a little bit playing ping pong, when you can envisage that these nanoparticles are ping pong balls, and this is your racket. So the moment when the ping pong balls, or nanoparticles in our case, are passing through that vein which is above the tumor, the ultrasound physically pushes it deeper into the tumor volume. So in this situation, we can increase the amount of nanoparticles in the tumor, which is perfect because you have in this situation much less side effects which are associated with delivering these nanoparticles to a different region. And then you can switch from planar wave to the focused ultrasound, and in this situation, what happens? The focused ultrasound breaks open these nanoparticles and releases the drug only in the vicinity where it should be. So at the end, we have the situation that we combine two treatments, hypothermia with delivering the drug. But you know, the HIFU or the ultrasound in general, as I mentioned, is used to push it through the barriers. You know, we have a lot of barriers in the body, and the ultrasound, as I mentioned, is capable of pushing through the barriers. But this is not the only effect the ultrasound does, because the ultrasound on itself is doing the sonoporation. So in this situation, our cell membranes and the barriers which we have in the body, they porate, they open up a little bit. So in this moment, what you have these spaces in between when the particles can pass through. So through the applying ultrasound, you sonoporate your membranes, and you increase also the number of particles which can go through. Not only number of particles, but also if you have a free-floating drug here, the drug will be sucked into the cell cytosol as well. So the sonoporation is something which is worth including in our conversations and thinking about a HIFU, because we will always have the sonoporation in the system. Now I don't know what is happening here. There is nothing on my slide, but this is also nothing here. So, but I will explain you what it is. So this is how we produce nanoparticles. And these particles I was referring here, there are two classes of nanoparticles, lipid nanoparticles and the polymer-based nanoparticles. And these are very standard. This is used clinically, as I mentioned. Our vaccines are lipid-based nanoparticles. Yesterday, someone mentioned during the talk that we have thermosensitive lipid nanoparticles. Actually, every single lipid nanoparticle is thermosensitive. Lipids melt between the temperatures, which are room temperatures, and below room temperatures, up to 76, 78 degrees. So everything is pretty much thermosensitive. And we can select the lipids which will be melting at the temperature which is associated with the heating of the tumor with HIFU. And exactly the same happens with polymers. We can take the polylactic acid, polylactic glycolic acid, and they are melting pretty much about 75 degrees. And this is the effect which can actually release the drug. And in this situation, you have two scenarios. The first one is purely mechanical. If you have these capsules which have the nanoparticles inside, when you expose them to the ultrasound, the pressure inside them pretty much bursts open the capsules and the drug is released. There's no thermal effect here. But the second one is actually a thermal effect. So when you have this nanoparticle and you increase the temperature above glass transition temperature and then the melting temperature, this particle melts and releases the drug. But when do we use the first one? We use it when we have the drug which is temperature sensitive. You don't want to kill your drug when you are applying ablation. You want to make sure that the temperature is safe to the drug. So if you have a drug which is very sensitive, you have to use the second approach. And very quickly, again, there are a few things missing on my slide. This is the example of lipid nanoparticles which have been opened up and the drug was released. I won't go through this. Is the lipid nanoparticles which we produce. And this one specifically is delivering the oxygen. We use the oxygen as the adjuvant for the cancer therapy. So it's oxygen delivery because we all know that oxygen does this stuff. But now, if you have a chemotherapy, there is one very important element. Chemotherapy, even if nanoparticles, even if you target this maximum to what you can, few percent, the rest will be outside. So we want to avoid this. We want to synthesize drug inside the cells. So we deliver the prodrug and the activator. And what happens, these capsules are open only for the application of the ultrasound. And what happens, the activator, the enzyme typically activates the prodrug inside the cells, and you have the synthesis of the drug inside the cell. So if we take the example what is here, when we inhale the formulation, it's a dry powder formulation. If we inhaled it here, we didn't activate it, there was no side effects. I'll go through it quickly. Again, there's nothing on my slide here, but another examples of nanoparticles are solid nanoparticles. Ion, gallium, silver, those kind of nanoparticles which can be used. And I gave also another example, which is graphene. It is a two-dimensional material. So what happens with these nanoparticles, when they are exposed to the ultrasound actually, they work like a roadblocks. So the ultrasound interacts with them and moves them up and down. So it mechanically sort of pushes the particles up and down, and this mechanical disruption changes certain parameters inside the cell. So this is mechanical sort of stimulation of the cells. And why graphene? Two-dimensional? Because it has a very large surface area. So now we are exploiting not the movement, but the local reflection of the beam. So the beam goes there and locally reflects, and we achieve something which we call dose enhancement. So we are enhancing the effect of the ultrasound on the spot. And this is, again, there's a lot of stuff missing here, but this is something which you can see with the nanoparticles liver. This is a pork liver. Nanoparticles injected, the no nanoparticles, and you can appreciate the difference in the size of this, and you can see how deeply we went with nanoparticles versus non-nanoparticle system. And the last example, very quickly, I'll go through this, is the piezoelectric nanoparticles. What it means piezoelectric? When you change the dimension of the particles, they generate electricity. So when you generate electricity, you can use it for therapeutic purposes, but also in cancer therapy at certain levels, you can start killing the cells with this electricity. So we demonstrate that using the high intensity focused ultrasound, we can move lattice, the elements in the lattice of the crystalline nanoparticles, and they generate electricity. So combining the electricity with HIFU, if necessary, maybe even with the drug, we achieve better effects. So in summary, what we can actually achieve with these nanoparticles, we can have a bit of the targeting. I wouldn't call it, this is passive targeting, external targeting, enhanced penetration to the tumor volume, then opening the nanoparticles in the vicinity of the tumor, and some operation to increase the volume. And at the end, it is something which I would label as the multifunctional. Again, acknowledgement is actually not on the screen again, but I would like to acknowledge especially Professor Felix Wong, who was instrumental actually to our work. Jasmine, who is our student, is working very, very hard on these. By the way, for the veterinary applications, very important applications for us. So this is pretty much all from me. I'm Wojciech Chrzanowski, I'm Professor of Nanomedicine, and I represent the University of Sydney. Thank you.